Hello, I'm R.G.E and I mostly speedrun obscure N64 games. These games generally don't have a lot of speedrunning documentation, so in this series I want to document my personal experience when speedrunning these games. I'll therefore cover the history of the game as a speed game, talk about speed strats, interesting movement tech, and glitches, along with the world record progression for the game. I hope you enjoy. Okay, in my last video I covered Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, and now we will cover the next game I ran, Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine on the N64. Because of the long name, in this video I will mostly refer to the game as just Infernal Machine. The Infernal Machine has a special place in my heart because it was one of the wildest and most dramatic glitch hunting and speedrunning rides I have ever been on. The game turned out to be so incredibly broken that during a few months of 2021, the game completely crumbled apart before us, and frankly, it was glorious. Here is the story of the Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine N64 speedrunning revolution. Now, before we start talking about the development of the speedrun, I would like to talk a little bit about just how this game is set up. The game has 16 levels for you to beat to get to the credits, and the only known way to progress to the next level is to beat the previous one. There is no hub world or any options to do the levels out of order, so every level has to be played, and to speedrun this game you are essentially always looking for the fastest way to get from the beginning of a level to the end of the level. The levels are as follows: Canyonlands, Babylon, Tian Shan River, Shambhala Sanctuary, Palawan Lagoon, Palawan Volcano, Palawan Temple, Jeep Track, Teotihuacan, Olmec Valley, Pudovkin, Meroe, King Saul's Mines, Nub's Tomb, Infernal Machine, and lastly, Aetherium. I should note that there is also a bonus level called Peru, which has to be played on the PC version of the game, but on the N64 version the credits play right after Aetherium, so we don't play Peru in the any % speedrun, so I will not be talking about it in this video. Now, during this video I will display this green bar next to each level and numbers on the top and the bottom. The top number shows a rough estimate for how long it takes to finish the level without glitches, and the bottom number will show how long it takes to beat the level with glitches at any given time in the video. This might give you some sense of just how much we are in fact skipping in this game. I should note that these timings are based on how we time the individual levels in the speedrun, so the final cutscene in each level is not timed. I also want to emphasize that these timings are in most cases rough estimates, and in some cases we really don't have too much data on how long it takes to finish a level, with or without the glitches. Now, before I get back into the discoveries, I would also like to talk about what was already known about the game before this revolution started. When I joined the community, a player called Lazy Skillet had done one run of the game, a 4 hour, 45 minutes and 5 seconds run, performed on the 15th of April 2019. Although their run was not very optimized and they only ever did one run, being the first to take on a full game run of this behemoth of a game is a feat by itself, so hats off to Lazy Skillet. Lazy Skillet had however already found one pretty big skip by completely skipping a level called King Saul's Mines. Now, this game had a somewhat rushed production, so not all levels were polished as well as the developers would have wanted. One level that fell victim to this was the level King Saul's Mines. You see, the Infernal Machine has the option to play with the regular jumper pack or the expansion pack with better resolution. However, it turns out that the level King Saul's Mines requires an expansion pack to play it. The developers didn't manage to make this level work properly without the expansion pack, so if you don't have the expansion pack, the game just skips the level entirely and puts you right into the next one. So simply by turning off the console, taking out the expansion pack, putting in the regular jumper pack, and then entering the level, the game would skip this level and put you right into the next one. Lazy Skillet could then turn off the console again, put in the expansion pack again, and continue with the next level in the game. Lazy Skillet also skipped picking up a machine part in the level Put Off Kin by climbing up a crane discovered by Molotok for the PC version of the game, which saved around 4 minutes. And just to get it out of the way, this level is still played mostly the same today, except for a slightly faster crane skip and a small cutscene skip, both discovered by me, saving an additional minute. So these days it takes around 4 minutes to beat this level optimally. Lazy Skillet also used many small optimizations found by Molotok, H.LUM.R, Rians, and others found for the PC version that had been used for PC individual level runs. There was also one skip in the level Olmec Valley, which Lazy Skillet had not used in their run, which had been found by Brandon Mears. In the beginning of the level, you start at the top of a waterfall, and one of your first objectives in the level is to make your way to the bottom through a cave. Brandon, however, bypassed this by abusing the opening cutscene in the level. Many opening cutscenes in the game allow for 1 frame of input before the cutscene actually starts, and this input can be buffered by simply holding the desired input while the cutscene starts. Brandon used this frame to jump off the waterfall during the cutscene, and since Indy would not take damage during the cutscene, he would land below without any fall damage, skipping the short cave section completely. This saved around 20 seconds. And that's pretty much it regarding the development of the speedrunning strats before this whole revolution started. In March 2021, I was looking for a new game to glitch hunt and speedrun, and I liked the look and feel of Indiana Jones and the Infernal machine, so I joined the speedrunning Discord server. The game only had 1 speedrun on the leaderboards, so it seemed like a fun project to try to optimize. Up to that point, there really hadn't been any discussion about running the N64 version of the game, so not much was known about it. But as I browsed the internet, looking for glitches, it didn't take long for me to come across the first impactful glitch in the game: the crawl glitch. Now, before we go on, as stated before, there are a lot of glitches in this game, and in fact, I already made a video explaining how these glitches work in detail. Since these glitches really are an integral part of the development of the speedrun for the game, I will be playing sections from the old video in this video to explain the glitches. If you have already watched my old video and know how these glitches work, I will provide timestamps in the bottom right corner to skip the recap from the old video. Now, back to the crawl glitch. In 2015, a YouTube channel called Shrekslot uploaded a video to YouTube showing that when Indy crawled into a certain rock from a particular angle, he would enter a glitched state. In this state, Indy looks sort of like a car or a boat and floats along the ground while stuck in a crawling animation. The video showed the glitch as an interesting visual glitch that tends to soft-lock the game, but when we looked at this and tried it out, we soon discovered that there was a lot more to this glitch. Crawl glitch is attained by falling or sliding off ledges during a crawl. This is normally not supposed to be possible, but certain slopes or surfaces will allow Indy to fall during the crawl. We don't really know the technical specifics about why this works, but we believe it has something to do with Indy's falling or sliding animation getting mixed up with the crawling animation. When Indy is in the crawl glitch state, his movement options seem very limited at first. If you try to jump, you might softlock, and it is impossible to use any equipment or interact with buttons or such. However, if you use the jump button correctly, it can have some extraordinary results. If Indy is on a slope and you press the jump button, Indy gets latched onto the slope, and the collision for that particular slope or polygon seemingly extends endlessly in all directions. Indy can therefore essentially fly along the axis of the slope however far he wants. When you want the flight to end, all you have to do is press the jump button again. To summarize, the crawl glitch state essentially has two sub-states. Normal crawl glitch state, where Indy is not latched onto a polygon, or flying state, where Indy has latched onto a polygon and can therefore fly around. The jump button is used to go from one of these states to the other. With this, you can start a crawl glitch flight to get to one location, then get out of crawl glitch flying and find a new slope to latch onto to get to the next location. So you can basically string together many crawl glitch flights to get to your various unintended locations. However, there are some limitations or rules to this flying that you have to know if you want to use this glitch. Firstly, when you press the jump button to get out of the flying state, you have to make sure that Indy has gained or lost height from his initial jump button press. That is, that Indy's height coordinates are not the same as when you started the flight. For this reason, it's often impossible to get out of the flight if you started the flight on level ground. If you are locked onto a polygon which is level, as in not a slope, there is seemingly no way to gain or lose height. There are, however, ways to nudge Indy to a different height by grinding along a slanted wall or bumping into objects that will allow you to escape the level flight. Another important rule is that Indy needs to be moving when he presses the first A to start the flight, or else he will softlock. Also, when pressing A the second time to get rid of the flying state, Indy must also be far enough off the ground that he can fall or slide shortly before landing, meaning you cannot get rid of the flight while on the ground. Indy will also softlock if he enters cutscene triggers while in the flying state, but he can enter cutscenes if he is in non-flying normal crawl glitch state. And then finally, to get rid of the crawl glitch state, you can do one of three things. You can die and reload, you can save and reload to load back in at the last checkpoint, or crouch next to a collectible item, which for some mysterious reason allows you to end the crawl glitch state. The first skip we found was unsurprisingly in the level the glitch was originally found in, Olmec Valley. Now, this level serves as a good example of just how long and complex some of these levels can be. Here you can see the normal glitchless route through the level. Normally you have to play through a series of puzzles to open up bridges across the valley, which in turn lead you through tunnels which eventually get you to a pyramid. You can then pick up an idol at the top of the pyramid, which triggers an elevator that allows you to enter the pyramid, and inside you fight a snake boss to finish the level. We quickly found out that it was in fact possible to use crawl glitch to fly all the way to the end to the pyramid, but unfortunately, since we had crawl glitch, we were not able to interact with items and could therefore not pick up the idol that allows you to enter the pyramid. We also found out that the checkpoints next to the pyramid didn't work yet, so dying and reloading did not work to enter the pyramid. What we did find out is that by triggering a certain cutscene in the middle of the level, the checkpoints for the rest of the level would start working. So what we had to do was use the crawl glitch flight once to reach the cutscene, get crawl glitch a second time to fly to the pyramid, activate a checkpoint there, die, and then reload so we could get rid of the crawl glitch and enter the pyramid. The route then looked something like this, considerably shorter than the intended one. However, we still needed to fight a lengthy boss battle against the snake boss, so although the route looks much shorter, it didn't save as much time as you would have thought, and it only ended up saving around 3 or 4 minutes. Now, I say only 3 or 4 minutes here because although that would probably be considered a very decent time save in most speed games, for the Infernal machine it really was just a fraction of the time saves that were about to ensue. The next level we broke was Moreau, which is one of the longest levels in the game, taking around 25 minutes to play without glitches. It's an extremely convoluted level where the main goal is to gain entry into the 4 pyramids of the level. To do this, you need to first complete a series of puzzles on the outside and then traverse around underground through 4 mazy pyramids to activate a beacon on top of each one. Now, I won't show you the route here, but just trust me, it's a very long and mazy level that just takes a ton of time to finish. All you really need to know is that the end of the level is at the bottom of this big pyramid, and the door to the end is right here. I managed to find a crawl glitch rock just outside the final door you have to open. By getting flight at one of the slopes outside, then flying at this door, and then wiggling the joystick a little, I was able to clip through the door. After going through the door and activating a checkpoint, I could save and reload to get rid of the flying glitch and finish the level from there. We still needed to collect a few things outside to activate a minecart within the final pyramid. This minecart would then get us into the final corridor of the level, where the level would end. But even though we needed to get these things, it was still a huge skip, and essentially skipped around 20 minutes of intended gameplay. We also managed to find a way to skip a section of Canyonlands, the first level in the game. The Canyonlands is essentially a tutorial level where you play through various platforming aspects to learn the game. The whole level is basically just a loop, and the only thing separating the beginning and the end is one slope. We didn't find a way up the slope, but we did find a rock around halfway through the level, which allowed us to get crawl glitch, and using that we were able to fly straight to the end of the level. The route then looked like this, and we saved around half a minute. The next glitch we discovered was a method to hover. Hovering is a simple but slow technique to gain height next to almost any wall in the game. In order to hover, all you have to do is crawl next to a wall and get Indy to clip slightly into it. This can be done by approaching the wall from an acute angle. After clipping slightly through the wall, you can mash the R button, which is the button you normally hold to crouch or crawl, and by mashing R, Indy will gain a little bit of height with each R press, and therefore you can hover upwards. I want to add that there is also another way to hover called an auto hover. This can be achieved by crawling into water. When you crawl into water, Indy will start hovering. The unique thing about the auto hover, however, is that you don't have to mash R, but instead, as long as you just hold R, Indy will automatically gain height on his own. Using the hover, I managed to find a way to skip the final boss in Nub's Tomb. Now, hovering is very slow, since you only gain a small amount of height for every R press. When you beat the boss, you normally gain access to this ledge at the top of the room, but we could skip the boss simply by hovering all the way up any of these walls to reach the ledge. This wall is, however, quite high, and the hover to perform this skip took around 90 seconds. So it only saved a tiny bit of time over a perfect boss fight, but it was much more consistent than doing the fight, albeit maybe slightly less fun and exciting. The next skip we found using the hover was in the final level of the game, Aetherium. In Aetherium, you normally start at the bottom of the level and have to swim your way through these sci-fi swimming hallways to gain access to the upper half of the map. Once there, you go to the top of the level where you fight the first phase of the boss. After defeating the boss, you gain the Lightning Whip and can start unlocking the middle section of the level to collect 3 gems, or keys essentially, that open various doors that ultimately allow you to face the second half of the boss fight. Once the boss is defeated, a barrier goes away, granting you access to this final section of the level, which allows you to climb to the end. Basically, there's a lot to do in this level. What I found out was that when in front of the barrier leading to the end section of the level, if you hovered far enough up the barrier, Indy would eventually start clipping through. If you then stood up, Indy would clip through and could start making his way towards the end of the level. So now, we still needed to do the first half of the level the same. We gained access to the top and fought the first phase of the boss. But after that, we only collected 1 gem instead of the usual 3, so we could get access to the barrier. And once there, we did the skip and finished the level, skipping the second phase of the boss fight. This saved around 5 minutes. When I found the hover, I was getting pretty amazed how broken this game was, but nothing could prepare me for the next glitch I came across. In Palawan Lagoon, I was playing around with the auto hover and I tried to hover from the edge of the beach all the way to the rock formations surrounding the area. When I was all the way up against the rocks, I released the crawl button, and when Indy stood up, he suddenly started moving upwards towards the top of the cliffs. And when he reached the top, he was flung at incredible speeds far out of bounds, and thus we had the next big glitch in Infernal machine speedrunning: launches. Now, although all launches are probably the result of the same glitchy mechanic, there are many methods to achieve a launch, so I refer to different methods to achieve these launches with different terms. The one I discovered first is what I call slope launches. The way they work is that first you have to get Indy to a slanted position while crawling. If you then hover, he will not hover straight up, but instead he will hover diagonally towards the upper area of the slope. If you then hover towards a wall, Indy will seem to clip through the wall slightly with his head. Then, if you stand up while facing up against the wall, Indy will for some reason gain insane amounts of speed very quickly and launch forward. These launches can be very finicky to control, and if Indy gains too much speed while up against the wall, he will swiftly launch to his own death. The launches would, by the end of the year, come to be really impactful for the speedrun, but it was still going to take us a while to get there. What we managed to find at first was a big skip in Palawan Lagoon. The normal route through the level looks something like this, but our main point of interest is this section right here. Notice how these two paths here, one right at the start of the level and the other at the end here, are very close to each other, and in fact they are only separated by one sloping wall. So what we were able to do was hover up the wall and do a small launch to reach the top of the ledge. We could then run right to the end, so with this we could skip everything except picking up a machete at the start. This saved around 8 or 9 minutes of gameplay. There were also a few other discoveries made using launches during this period. In Babylon, we managed to skip a cutscene. In the beginning of the level, we can avoid a minute-long cutscene by launching past the cutscene trigger. Normally, Indy has to climb on top of this house, and the climbing animation will put Indy right into the trigger for the cutscene. Using a launch, we can either launch to the top of the house or even further past it, making it so we never have to climb up and trigger the cutscene, saving more than a minute. I also found a super precise skip in Palawan Temple. In Palawan Temple, you would normally have to make your way through various tunnels, puzzles, and platforming to make your way to the boss of the level. The boss is defeated by pressing a button located just outside this lake. After pressing the button, you can run to the end of the level to finish it. The skip I found could be done after getting to this area. by hovering up a wall and then using a slope to launch past this big canyon, I was able to land safely in the water and reach the button that kills the boss. Although in my opinion very flashy and nice looking, this trick was unfortunately too precise for full game runs. It was around this time that a player called the Kovich, an infernal machine runner who at that point had the world record in the PC version of the game, posted a video in the Discord showing a method to skip canyonlands found by someone else, not me nor the Kovich. Now, remember that method I had found for skipping a part of Canyonlands? Well, the video that the Kovich posted had the same skip, but it had been posted in August 2020, almost an entire year earlier than I had posted my skip. When we took a better look at the YouTube channel, we discovered something amazing. Someone had already been glitch hunting the Infernal machine for the past year, and this person was already way ahead of us. This person's name was Bluescreen18, and he would not only become the best glitch hunter for the Infernal machine, but would also become one of the greatest glitch hunters I personally know, breaking many other obscure N64 games. A name you will see a lot on this channel in the future. When we looked through his YouTube channel, we saw that he had already found the hover in Palawan Lagoon to skip most of the level, though he did not use any launching, but just the hover. He had also found a different way to fly to the end of Meroe by getting out of bounds to unload all the walls instead of clipping through the door. And remember that skip I had found that used a launch in Palawan Temple, which was too precise for full game runs? Well, he had also already found a method to get to the button killing the boss using a much more consistent way by crawl glitch flying instead of launching. So now we could go this route through the level to consistently save around 6.5 minutes in Palawan Temple. Basically, a lot of the stuff I thought I had discovered first had already been found a few months earlier by Bluescreen. As a side note, I find it very interesting that both me and Bluescreen are Icelandic. Iceland only has a population of around 370,000 people, and it's kind of amazing that within a span of a year, two Icelanders who didn't know of each other started glitch hunting an old N64 game 20 years after its release. A game that wasn't even released in Iceland for the N64. I at least find that kind of amazing. Anyway, Bluescreen's YouTube channel also had some new skips we had never seen before. In Shambhala Sanctuary, one of the longest levels in the game, you are supposed to go around a few buildings in a sanctuary, solving a bunch of long puzzles to eventually get to the Ice Guardian, the boss in the level. However, Bluescreen had found a way to get to the boss of the level early by getting crawl glitch on a stair set and then crawl glitch flying out of bounds. Now, one interesting thing that happens when you go out of bounds is that all collision is lost, and you can essentially just fly through walls. Why this happens, we have no idea. Normally, if you fly out of bounds and then stop flying, you will therefore just fall through the ground, soft-locking the game. But if you end your flight in the right spots, sometimes the collision will load back in. We don't really have a good understanding of how or why the collision sometimes loads in, whether it has to do with sectors loading, height from the ground, or location coordinates in general, but we have basically just learned that when flying from certain slopes, some spots work and others don't. The main point though is that Bluescreen was able to land inside the boss room. There you can get a checkpoint by entering a certain trigger to play the boss opening cutscene. You can then let the boss kill you and then respawn without crawl glitch to finish the level normally by killing the boss. The route then looked like this and completely skipped all the main buildings and puzzles in the level. So this skip saved around 17 minutes. In Babylon, he then also found a method to use crawl glitch flying to skip a big chunk of the level. In Babylon, you are normally supposed to make your way along the enemy compound to find a car to enter the compound. Then you proceed to find the underwater maze, and after that you can find your way down to the underground library, where you collect 3 tablets and a statue to get back up to the surface and end the level. Bluescreen found out that you could use this slope to get Crawl Glitch, and then use Crawl Glitch to fly from outside the enemy base into the section right after the water maze, skipping having to find a car to enter the enemy base and most of the enemy base itself. The route then looked like this, skipping a large part of the enemy base, and it saved around 2.5 minutes. After having watched Bluescreen's videos, it was immediately clear to us that we needed to contact him and have him join the Discord, so we could combine our knowledge and join forces to break this game even further. We reached out to him, and soon enough he had joined the Discord. My friend Nathan is bored also took some interest in the game and also joined the Discord. Now, although I have already covered a lot of skips, at this point only 10 days had passed since I originally joined the Discord. And now, since I, the Kovic, Bluescreen, and Nathan is bored were in the Discord together, you might say that this is where the true speedrunning revolution started. To get Crawl Glitch at this point, we were simply crawling into certain rocks, but we never really knew why it happened. We speculated that the glitch happened because of falling or sliding during the crawling animation, and soon confirmed that this was in fact the case. Knowing this meant that we had a much better idea of where to look for locations where the crawl glitch could be achieved, and new potential for the crawl glitch seemed to pop up just about everywhere. All the levels in the game are covered with all sorts of slopey geometry, and new spots where crawl glitch flying could be achieved were being found every day. We started by optimizing Moreau further by using Bluescreen's method of unloading the walls. At that point we still had to pick up some stuff to use a minecart to ride into the final trigger of the level. The Kovic had earlier theorized you could end the level by entering the final corridor of the level without using the minecart at all, as long as Indy just touches the end level trigger. The Kovic would also confirm that his theory was highly likely to work since he had checked the code for the game, which was something he would frequently do during our glitch hunting efforts. I would then find a convenient slope outside the pyramid, which allowed us to fly out of bounds to unload all the collision and then fly into the final corridor in the level. This meant we could skip having to collect the stuff to get the minecart running and just fly right into the corridor where the end trigger for the level was. So the route looked like this. This ended up saving extra 2 minutes on top of the already 20 minutes skipped, and the level only took around 2 minutes to beat. Babylon would also see new improvements using the crawl glitch. Bluescreen had already found a method to skip most of the enemy base, but I improved on that by finding a spot to fly directly into the underground library at the bottom. You could get crawl glitch on the same slope as before, and then fly on the top of a tent, and from that slope you could fly out of bounds to unload all collision and then proceed into the library. In there you could land to reload the collision, get a checkpoint, and save and reload to get rid of the crawl glitch, and collect the tablets and the Marduk statue to finish the level. At first we thought this route was impossible because of the elevator in the level. Normally you activate the elevator from above and ride down. Then later in the level you insert a gizmo into a device to start a cutscene, and that moves the elevator slightly up, very slowly. But now when we insert the gizmo, the elevator has to ride all the way to the bottom extremely slowly, taking around 50 seconds to reach the bottom. So the cutscene becomes a lot longer. I initially thought I had soft-locked the game when I inserted the gizmo, but luckily I decided to try waiting to see what would happen, and eventually the elevator came down. This saved around 1 or 2 minutes over the older crawl glitch flying method. After that we took a look at Tianshan River, also known either as the river level or the raft level. For the casual player, Tianshan is a very confusing and difficult level, since you have to ride a very awkward and unwieldy raft down a mazy stream to try to collect 4 candles on the way. The 4 candles are located in these 4 stops along the rivers. At the bottom of the river there is an elevator that takes you to the top again. Without using any glitches, you would normally ride down the stream to collect 2 candles, take the elevator up again, ride down to collect candles 3 and 4, take the elevator up again, and then go to the end of the level, requiring 2 rides down the stream and 2 elevator rides. Both me and Bluescreen got to work, and soon Bluescreen found a way to shorten the first ride down the river. Instead of riding the raft, which is both slow and difficult, Bluescreen found out that you could get crawl glitch on this pedestal and crawl glitch fly to the first candle. I would then later find a slightly earlier spot to get crawl glitch on a rock, making it slightly faster. I then theorized that you could crawl glitch fly from the second candle to the third candle, making it so you could collect all the candles in one ride down the river, skipping 1 elevator ride to the top again. With help from Nathan's board, we managed to find a series of crawl glitch flights to get from the second candle to the third, and a somewhat consistent way to do it. Finding a method to escape the house with the second candle proved to be the most difficult part to find. First, you have to get crawl glitch next to the second candle pedestal. Then you start flying off one of the stairs. Now, the stairs are a level surface, and remember, we always need to change our height before ending a crawl glitch flight. So, in order to do that, you need to bump into one of these spinning pistons to change your height. This has to be done on just the right spot though, because we need to land on the moving piston platform below. After that, you can start flying off the piston, which is also a level surface, but since the piston moves up and down and Indy is tied to the polygon on the piston, Indy will also move up and down as long as the piston is still rendered in. This means you can fly to the side, wait for Indy to rise with the piston to change his height, and then you can end the flight above a small sloping log, where you can start the next crawl glitch flight to get outside. After that, you need to do 3 more flights on various slopes to reach the next candle. This sequence of crawl glitch flights remains as one of the more entertaining speedrunning tricks in the game, in my opinion. So, with these 2 new tricks in the level, the route looked like this. You started by crawl glitch flying instead of rafting to skip this section, and then proceeded to collect all 4 candles in one ride through the river, and you only needed to ride the elevator once instead of twice. Although quite convoluted and difficult, these optimizations only saved just over a minute, but I feel they made the level much more fun, versatile and challenging. I then discovered a new type of method to initiate a launch, which I sometimes refer to as a ledge launch. By hovering up a wall all the way to a ledge and standing up when Indy is at the right height compared to the ledge, Indy will stay parallel to the ledge but will only be able to move sideways along the ledge. He can then make his way to the end of the ledge and then launch off the end or the corner of the ledge. This led to a new and faster way to skip almost all of Canyonlands, the first level in the game. Remember, there's only one steep slope separating the beginning of the level and the end cutscene trigger, and I discovered that by climbing up one ledge and then hovering up and doing a ledge launch from this ledge, you can reach the end area at the top of the slope and run to the end trigger. Now we could basically go right from the start of the level to the end. But the hovering was pretty slow, so it still took around a minute to finish the level. At this point, nobody had actually performed a proper run with the new skips, but the first person to step up to the task was the Kovich, and on the 30th of March, he got a time of 3 hours, 32 minutes and 38 seconds, improving the world record by more than an hour, and also beating the PC version of the game, and thus making N64 the fastest version to run. And just to get an idea of how fast things were progressing, I joined the Infernal Machine Speedrunning Discord on the 13th of March 2021, 17 days before this record. Almost all the glitches I have been mentioning had either been discovered in that time frame or they had come to light, as Blue Screen had of course found some of these skips a lot earlier, but nobody in the community knew about them. Basically, new findings were being unraveled at an incredible rate. And another example of just how rapidly things were progressing at this point, during the COVID's world record run, I was glitch hunting and found a new skip in Olmec Valley. Remember how in Olmec Valley you have to enter a pyramid to fight the snake boss to finish the level? Well, after you defeat the snake, you're supposed to leave the pyramid by an opening located here, that only opens after you defeat the snake. Going through this opening is what triggers the end of the level, and actually the level really ends when you step on this polygon. By getting crawl glitch and flying out of bounds to unload all wall collision and then flying to a precise spot within the wall on the pyramid, you could in fact go into the door or wall itself and land directly on the end trigger of the level. This skipped the snake boss fight completely, so it saved around 5 minutes. This skip was a very welcome addition since fighting the snake would often crash the game and was very hard to perform optimally. But unfortunately it was a little bit too difficult to perform in actual runs, since it involved landing on top of very finicky and small tree polygons to get the right angle for the crawl glitch flight. But most importantly, it showed us that it was in fact possible to land on the end level trigger without beating the boss. After that, I turned my attention to Jeep Track, a level that, as the name suggests, involves driving a Jeep around to get to the end. This was one of the shorter levels in the game, taking around 2.5 minutes to finish normally. But it was difficult to get so fast optimally because of the Jeep controls. The level involves a lot of tricky jumps and driving the Jeep is very finicky, so getting a good time on this level was difficult. Blue Screen told me about a crawl glitch spot in the beginning of the level, and I found a way to fly all the way to the end of the level. The route was then like this. This might have saved around 10 seconds over a perfect normal drive through the level, but since it was a lot more consistent, it would generally end up saving some time for us. However, unfortunately, this made the level a lot more boring to play, skipping genuinely fun gameplay driving the Jeep. This meant that you needed to fly straight out of bounds for around 80 seconds, essentially just holding forward on the analog stick instead of driving the Jeep. After that, I took a look at a level called Palawan Volcano and found another crawl glitch spot by falling off a block with a weapon on it. Normally, you wouldn't be able to fall off 90-degree angles, but for some reason having this weapon on the block allowed us to fall off the block and initiate crawl glitch. With the crawl glitch, we could fly out of bounds towards the end of the level, and with a few carefully selected slopes to fly on, we could get a checkpoint and then die to finish the level normally from there. The normal route through the level looks something like this, but with this skip we could play through around 2/3 of the level and then perform the skip, so it looked something like this. With this, you could skip a section involving rescuing a character called Sophia, and this saved just over a minute. Then I took a look at Nub's Tomb. Now, Nub's Tomb is another long level, as you can see when looking at the normal route here. It takes around 18 minutes to finish normally. My new discovery, however, happened after reaching this room. There, you could get crawl glitch on this slope, and then start flying off this slope, so Indy is in a slanted position grinding against the ground. While in this state, I discovered you could actually clip through the floor. We don't really know how this works, and we haven't really found anything similar in other parts of the game, but we believe it has something to do with how the game loads sectors, since you have to make sure to go across this line and back while in crawl glitch flight before the clip works. This allowed you to fly blindly towards the basement of the level with the electric pool, skipping a bunch of puzzles. With the new route, we then played towards this room and performed the clip, and then flew downwards to here and finished the level normally from there. This skipped a big portion of the level and saved around 9 minutes of regular gameplay. Then, one evening, both me and Bluescreen were glitch hunting the level Teotihuacan. And just another example of how fast things were progressing, within the span of 1 minute, both of us reported having broken the level completely, allowing you to skip nearly everything in the level. Normally, you would have to go around the whole level to collect 3 idols to place on pedestals to open up a door in the basement, but we found a method to clip through the door, saving around 10 minutes. Interestingly, we both had different versions to do the skip, but Bluescreen's method turned out to be faster. He would use a new type of glitch called hang unload. Although the crawl glitch is a pretty broken mechanic, we can actually break it even further by doing something called a hang unload. So, after activating the crawl glitch, you can then fly to a spot where if you release the flight, Indy grabs onto a ledge. After grabbing onto the ledge, you let go of it, and the act of letting go of the ledge triggers the hang unload. Now, this glitch makes things even more broken and stranger. First interesting aspect of this is that Indy can now use some items during the crawl glitch state, which normally isn't possible. But the most important thing that happens is that walls sort of just lose all of their collision. But luckily for us, the floor still keeps its collision. So now, since we are still in the crawl glitch state, we can simply start flying and fly through walls to get out of bounds virtually anywhere we want. This glitch is used once in the any % speedrun in Teotihuacan. By getting crawl glitch on a block in the bottom part of the level, we can then use one of the slopes nearby to fly up against this pillar. And when we end the flight, Indy will grab the ledge and be hanging. We then let go of the ledge to perform the hang unload, and after that we start flying once more. But since the walls are just suggestions now, we can fly through the final door in the level, skipping 90% of the level. With this skip, the route looks something like this, and we could now finish the level in around 90 seconds. After this, on the 3rd of April, the Covids did another run that clocked in at 2 hours, 41 minutes and 32 seconds, smashing the 3-hour barrier. I then found some small optimizations in Palawan Temple, a way to clip through a boulder to skip collecting a key, and a method to skip having to actually defeat the boss by simply flying past the boss to the end. These added around 2 more minutes of time saves, but these would actually become obsolete very quickly when Bluescreen told me about a way to get crawl glitch at the very beginning of the level, and me and Bluescreen would figure out how to use that to get to the end of the level. During the start of the opening cutscene of the level, you have one frame where you can actually perform one input for Indy. If you hold the crawl button during this frame, Indy will actually start crawling in the beginning of the cutscene, and he will keep crawling for the rest of the cutscene. Although Indy looks like he's walking, the game interprets him as crawling. Now, the great thing about this cutscene is that in the middle of it, Indy will jump off a ledge. This will make it so Indy is falling during a crawl, and therefore initiate the crawl glitch. From there, we chain together 6 crawl glitch flights to finish the level. First flight is to get past the lava pit, but since we activated the flight on level ground, we need to mash up against this slope to change Indy's height coordinates before ending the flight. We then proceed to activate a cutscene while we are in normal crawl glitch state, because we would softlock if we try to fly through it later. We then go to our second flight to reach the top of this fallen pillar. On it there is a small slope we use to start our third flight and proceed to fly to the next room. And now that the cutscene has already been activated, we can fly through. Then we fly to this platform and land there to start our fourth flight. This slope allows us to get up here where we start our fifth flight, which we can finally use to reach the top of the level and get out of bounds. Once Indy goes out of bounds, we can fly to the last section of the level, where we need one more slope to start our sixth flight to reach the trigger for the end of the level. The route then looked like this and saved an additional 3 to 4 minutes, making this level around 3 minutes in total. I would then take a better look at Olmec Valley and managed to find a much faster and easier method to perform snake skip. Earlier I had found a very complex way to skip the snake fight, using small trees with tiny slopes that required very precise movement. But I found out that by getting crawl glitch in the beginning of the level, you could actually just fly out of bounds right in the beginning and head to the end trigger. Then, because you went out of bounds, no collision would be loaded, so you could get through the pyramid wall to land on the end trigger. Blue screen would then also find a faster spot to get crawl glitch. With these implementations, the route looked something like this, and the level could be finished in around 2 minutes. Blue screen then found a new skip in Aetherium. Remember how in Aetherium we first need to defeat the first phase of the boss in order to get the lightning whip ability, which in turn allows us to collect the blue gem. Well, Blue Screen found out that after reaching the middle section of the level before fighting the boss, by getting crawl glitch you could fly to the other side of the room to reach the blue gem, which you could then use to reach the final barrier in the level. This skipped having to fight the first phase of the final boss, and combined with the hover we had found to skip the second phase of the boss, this meant that we could now skip the last boss completely. So now the route looked like this, and we never had to go to the top part of the level to beat the first phase of the boss. And this saved another 5 or 6 minutes. Blue Screen then started running the game and got a world record with a time of 2 hours, 20 minutes and 31 seconds on the 17th of April. At this point, the crawl glitch really defined the speedrun of the game. 11 out of the 16 levels had a crawl glitch flight to skip some parts of the level, and 3 levels used launching to some extent. Almost all the big skips in the game were done by crawl glitch flying, but this was about to change. At this point, just over a month had passed since I joined the Discord, and after Blue Screen's new world record, I posted a new skip I had found in Nub's Tomb to skip having to turn off the electricity by simply jumping across a gap, saving maybe 2 minutes or so. But this would soon become obsolete because Blue Screen found the most powerful speedrunning tech we have to this day. Before we can fully understand that though, we have to talk about another glitch called a slanted crouch unload. This next glitch is again a strange one, and frankly, I don't have any idea about the inner workings on this glitch. If Indy crouches in a slanted position up against a wall and stands up but starts crouching again before the standing up animation is finished, sometimes it can have the extraordinary effect that Indy will be in a hover and all collision everywhere simply disappears. That's right, simply by standing up and crouching again in the correct spots can make all collision unload. This glitch is used in a few places in the run, and they all seem to have their own quirks. Some are very easy to perform simply by having roughly the correct angle while standing up, while others seem to require multiple frame-perfect crouches and a perfect angle as well. Using the slanted crouch unload, we could break the game even further with a new kind of launch. After unloading all collision by using the slanted crouch unload, Indy is in a slanted position, and if you stand up and hold forward, Indy will launch. And remember, after doing the slanted crouch unload, there is no collision. Indy can essentially launch at insane speeds, anywhere he wants, with nothing in his way, and it is glorious.
This is truly the final form of speedrunning, near infinite speed and no collision. What more could you ask for?
Near infinite speed and no collision. The true final form of speedrunning. And that's precisely what we have on our hands with the rocket launch. But there is still one problem. If there is no collision, how can we land anywhere after the launch? Well, there are two methods we can use to manage that. The first method is to use the whip. In Nub's Tomb, we can reach an eligible slope very early on in the level, and from there we perform a slanted crouch unload to proceed to hover. After that, you find the correct angle and stand up to start the launch. Immediately after starting the launch, you have a small time frame to equip the whip. And then, if you whip at the correct frame, Indy will stop completely in the air and perform the whip animation. This, for some reason, tricks the game into loading in the collision again, so you can land safely on the ground. If done correctly, you will now be right in the final corridor leading to the end of the level. So, in Nub's Tomb, we could now just launch from the very first room in the level to the very last one, and it allowed us to beat the level in around 30 seconds. It was at this point that Bluescreen really ramped up his glitch hunting and started tearing through the game. He started by breaking Babylon some more. Earlier, Nathan's board had discovered a spot right at the start of the level where you can fly out of bounds. Bluescreen discovered that he could use a similar spot to hover out of bounds, and then instead of launching or doing anything particularly fancy, he just used gravity and dropped straight down. Then, in order to stop Indy at the right height, he used the whip with precise timing, and with that you could actually land right in the section below, saving having to do any crawl glitch flying to get there. So with this route we could just drop straight down into the library from the start of the level, and this saved just over a minute. Bluescreen would then find another rocket launch in Volcano. For this skip, you would have to play around 2 minutes into the level, and using this slope you could do a slanted crouch unload and a rocket launch that would get you to the very end of the level, saving around 13 minutes. Launching to the end, however, was extremely difficult because the area to land on is so small, so instead we would launch to one of the last areas in the level where we had a bigger landing platform. The distance and the speed Indy is traveling at in these launches make the angles and the timings needed to be successful extremely precise. So, by having a bigger landing platform, the angle and the whip press timing becomes slightly less demanding. We could then continue from that landing platform and play the level as we had done before. This ended up saving around 10 or 11 minutes. The Kovic then did another run and got a time of 2 hours, 15 minutes and 37 seconds on the 21st of April, and then the next day he got another run, clocking in at 1 hour, 56 minutes and 31 seconds, getting the first ever sub 2 hour run. At that point I was not doing any runs because I didn't own the game and only had an EverDrive or flash card to play the game. The problem with my flash card, which is an older version or a 2.5, is that in order for the game to save, you have to press the reset button on the console. But if the game crashed, pushing the reset button was not possible and I was not able to save any progress. Just to clarify though, more recent flash cards do not have this problem and can save without pressing the reset button. So people with newer flash cards can run this game on those. Going through the whole game without a crash was very unlikely at that point, so I essentially couldn't do any runs. But that same day that Kovic got his most recent world record, I finally got a proper cartridge for the game in the mail. So the next day I was able to do a run, and then I took the world record with a 1 hour, 48 minutes and 1 second time. Then a few days later I got a time of 1 hour, 32 minutes and 13 seconds on the 30th of April. Bluescreen would then make a new glitch discovery. At one point during our indie speedrunning endeavors, a Quest 64 runner called Bingchang was streaming, and a friend of mine called Ben42 told us that Bingchang mentioned a glitch he had found in Infernal Machine. He found that by jumping into a slope and mashing the jump button as Indy slid to the bottom, Indy's walking animation would become glitched, so it kind of looks like he's walking backwards when he walks forward. This walk is called sunwalk, as opposed to moonwalking. At first, this glitch seemed like it wouldn't have any real uses, but Bluescreen was able to find some extraordinary uses for this glitch. It turns out that if you perform a hover high enough while in sunwalk state, Indy will launch forward when he stands up. So the idea is that if Indy has sunwalk state and tries to stand up, but there's actually no ground under him, he will instead start launching. Since he is not in a slanted position like the slope launch, this launch will make Indy launch more downwards than upwards. In the Canyonlands, the only thing separating the start of the level from the end of the level is this slope. And we can use the sunwalk state to get right from the start of the level to the end of the level. To do this, you would get sunwalk by jumping into one of the slopes in the beginning. Then you could crouch and go up against another slope to start a hover. If you stood up after reaching enough height, Indy would launch forwards into the slope and bounce towards the finish. Now, this strat was only a few seconds faster than the Let's Launch version, but more importantly, it was a lot easier and more consistent. Now, the sunwalk had other benefits as well. It could also give you more control over Indy while in the air while launching. While we have the sunwalk state active, we have a lot more control over our launches than without the sunwalk state. Without the sunwalk state, Indy simply stops launching and loses his speed if you stop holding forward on the analog stick. But with the sunwalk state, Indy can stop launching and then resume the launch again if you press forward again. And another added benefit is that every time you stop and start launching again, Indy stops in the air for a brief amount of time. Therefore, by tapping the analog stick forward over and over again, we can manage Indy's falling speed and direction to some extent, and aim towards a landing spot. And this gives the game time to load in the collision again. Using this improved control in the air would lead to a faster and more consistent way to do the launch in Volcano. Remember how we had to use a bigger landing platform to make the launch more consistent? Well, now, since we had better control, we could launch all the way to the small platform at the very end of the level. When we are in position, we stand up and launch. At the right time, we then let go of the analog stick and let Indy fall slightly to see where we are situated. And then we can tap the analog stick in the direction we want to guide Indy towards the landing spot. If done correctly, we will be right in front of the door, which triggers the final cutscene of the level. This is still not easy per se, but this allows us to be somewhat lenient with our angle, and we don't have to perform a frame-perfect whip strike. This would save an additional 1 minute or so. Earlier I mentioned how Jeep Track got kind of boring when we found a method to skip most of it by crawl glitch flying to the end. Luckily, Bluescreen found a way to skip that skip. At around halfway through the level, you have to go through a cave, which, if you look at the map, is actually very close to the beginning of the level. Bluescreen found out that you can actually use the Jeep to drive out of bounds at the start of the level and land in the cave, skipping around half of the level. This turned out to be considerably faster than the flying method, and also a lot more interesting to speedrun. So now the level could be completed in around 90 seconds. Bluescreen then turned his eyes on Shambhala, where he found a way to skip the boss fight against the Ice Guardian. By using the slanted crouch unload on this small slope to unload all collision, you can hover through a wall and then do what's essentially a small rocket launch into the final corridor where the end trigger is, saving around 2 or 3 minutes. This skip now meant we could skip every boss in the game. We could launch past the Ice Guardian, fly past the Lava Guardian, fly past the Snake Guardian, launch past the Robot Guardian, and both fly and hover to skip the 2 phases of the final boss, Marduk. We then got a few more world records. First, the Kovic got a 1 hour 30 minutes and 6 seconds run on the 23rd of July. I then got a 1 hour 28 minutes and 19 seconds run on the 23rd of September. After that, Kovic got a 1 hour 23 minutes and 10 seconds run on the 27th of September. Bluescreen then told me about an alternate method to perform a launch. Using this, I would find a faster way to beat Canyonlands. With this new method, we can again get Sunwalk like before, but instead of hovering, we climb up the corner of this ledge in such a way that when Indy finishes his climbing animation, there is no ground under him, and he will start launching. After that, you have to precisely turn Indy around in the air and make him bump into one of the slopes so he bounces towards the finish. With this new strat, it only takes 10 seconds from the first input to reaching the end trigger. Here is the first level from the first input to the end cutscene. This would save an additional half a minute. After that, I got a new world record which clocked in at 1 hour 22 minutes and 38 seconds on the 3rd of October. As you can see by the dates of these world records, things were slowing down a bit for our speedrunning revolution. It had now been around half a year since I joined the Discord, and this eventful year of 2021 would soon come to an end. But before that happened, I went on a bit of a quest to find more rocket launches across the game, and I would find 3 new applications for the rocket launch. The first one I found was, like in many other instances, based on Bluescreen's extraordinary knowledge about the game. He told me about something we generally call R-warping. By holding R after loading a save or after dying, Indy will sometimes be transported to the beginning of the level. Technically, he is not really warping but zipping super fast from whichever checkpoint he should be loading into to the start of the level. This only works in some levels, and truthfully we have no idea how or why this works. We don't even know whether we should call this a glitch or if it's just a tool that the developers forgot to remove from the game. But anyway, with this I found out that after collecting the last candle in Tianxian, it was quicker to die and use the R-warp to zip to go to the beginning of the level, and from there I could launch to the candle pedestal in the end of the level, instead of having to ride the raft down to the bottom of the level and riding the elevator up. This now meant we could skip the elevator completely. This also removed the need to visit a spot that tends to crash the game, so that was a nice addition. The route then looked something like this, where we play through most of the level and then R-warp back to the beginning, which is represented by this white line, and then launch to the end section of the level, skipping the elevator completely. This saved just under a minute. I then took a look at Ethereum and discovered a method to launch from the first phase of the final fight straight to the end of the level. Remember how in some opening cutscenes you can buffer 1 frame of input to move Indy? Well, Bluescreen had earlier discovered that by holding up, Z, and A on the first frame of the opening cutscene, Indy would get a slight jump forward before the cutscene started. In this cutscene, Indy falls to the bottom of the level, but this small jump resulted in Indy landing in the upper area of the level during the cutscene, instead of falling all the way to the bottom. This had never really been useful before, since we needed an item called Tool from Beyond from the bottom of the level to open 2 barriers along the way. However, now we could use this method to skip the bottom half of the level and then proceed by swimming up to the first boss fight and enter this corridor, where we could do a slanted crouch unload and then rocket launch right to the end of the level. This launch is one of the more difficult launches in the game. The slanted crouch unload at that particular section is very difficult and precise, requiring the right angles, right timings, and positioning. And then the launch itself is also very precise, since it's a relatively short one and Indy is moving extremely fast when launching, and it's very easy to overshoot the target. It is, however, possible to use pause buffering to make the trick slightly more consistent, but even the pause buffering is difficult as well. The skip, however, allowed us to finish the level in around 2 minutes. Interestingly, after you do the launch, you cannot enter the final cutscene trigger right away. If you do this, a character called Sophia is not in the cutscene, and the cutscene just soft locks, where Indy and this character called Votlotnikov just stare at each other forever, waiting for Sophia to speak her dialogue. So the game never really reaches the credits. Instead, we found out that if we enter this tunnel and stand on this polygon, Sophia will enter the area and the cutscene is played like normal, and the final credits will start. We also decided that for the run to be verified on the leaderboards, you have to make sure Sophia is in the cutscene, because, well, having a run that can by no means reach the end credits just feels wrong, even though the softlock would take place after the timer normally ends. I then took a look at Shambhala Sanctuary, where I found another launch right from the beginning to the end of the level. Before this, we used to crawl glitch fly to the boss fight area and then rocket launch to get past the ice blocking the door to the final corridor. But now we were able to launch from the beginning right into the final corridor. This is, however, currently too precise for full game runs, so now we just launch to the boss area where the landing area is pretty big, instead of flying, saving around 30 seconds, and then use a second launch to skip the boss and get into the final corridor. So, in full game runs, this level now has 2 rocket launches. Up to this point, we had been skipping King Saul's mines with Lazy Skillet's method of turning off the console, replacing the expansion pack with the regular jumper pack, turning it on again, skipping King Saul's mines, turning it off again, replacing the jumper pack with the expansion pack again, and turning the console on again, and continue with the game. This whole ordeal took around 2 minutes to do, and the reason we did it like this was because running with the jumper pack increased the likelihood of crashing the game. But at this point the run was becoming so short that the odds of getting a crash were getting lower and lower. We also knew about certain spots that tended to crash the game, and luckily a lot of the skips we had found also skipped those spots. So we switched to doing the whole run with the jumper pack, saving over a minute. I then got a small PB with 1 hour, 21 minutes and 47 seconds on the 12th of October. The last big strat found during this eventful year of 2021 was found by Bluescreen in Babylon. He discovered that you could hover out of bounds and fall into the library like we used to do. But instead of collecting the 3 tablets that you needed to trigger the elevator, which in turn triggered a character called Turner to appear at the end of the level, Bluescreen only collected the Marduk statue and skipped collecting the tablets. Now, here's where things get a little bit convoluted. After landing in the library at the bottom of the level and collecting the Marduk statue, he would proceed to R-warp back to the beginning of the level. He would then launch up to the elevator shaft where Turner should be in the end of the level and fall down to his death. He would then R-warp again. Now, normally the R-warp zips you on super speed to the beginning of the level. But if you are in the right position when you die before doing the R-warp, Indy will get stuck on a wall on the way there in the middle of the zip. After getting stuck in the elevator shaft, he could hover slowly all the way up. Now, the reason we collect the statue is because the character Turner needs the statue. But Turner will not appear at the end of the level until you ride the elevator up at the end. But by hovering up and going upwards through the elevator shaft, Bluescreen sort of fooled the game into thinking he was riding the elevator up, so Turner would load in, allowing you to finish the level. The Kovich then optimized this strat by falling further down all the way into the statue room and R-warping back up from there. This new method saved just over 2 minutes. I then continued doing runs and got a run clocking in at 1 hour, 19 minutes and 19 seconds on the 7th of November. This was probably the last impactful moment of the year 2021 regarding the any % full game run. And you might say that the Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine N64 speedrunning revolution had come to an end. I should start by mentioning that in the following year, in February of 2022, I came back to the game and first got a time of 1 hour 16 minutes and 9 seconds on the 16th of February 2022, but my stream died that day and no video exists for this run. Luckily though, the next day I got a time of 1 hour 12 minutes and 38 seconds. And this is where the world record stands today. Now, just in case it was not obvious, I want to emphasize that the axes on the map with the world record progression do not represent time in any way. The real world record progression looks more like this. Earlier I mentioned that when the crawl glitch flying was at its peak, 11 out of the 16 levels used crawl glitch flying and only 3 of them used launches. In the current world record, 8 levels use launches and only 5 levels use crawl glitch flying, so the speedrunning meta has changed quite significantly at this point. Now, I want to mention that in my runs I used a metronome to perform some of the launches. The timing for these launches is so precise that I felt I would have no chance of being even remotely consistent without a metronome. And even with a metronome, they are by no means easy, as I failed both the launch in Nubstomb and Aetherium in my run, costing several minutes of time loss. Now, this run of mine still has many mistakes and is by no means optimized. So let's talk a bit about how low this game could potentially go with the current knowledge we have. My sum of best is 1 hour 8 minutes and 41 seconds, and I know it's not really optimized yet. I remember I never managed to get the launch in Aetherium first try in any run, so there are still minutes to be cut from my sum of best. So a sub 70 minutes run is definitely possible. Let's imagine that an optimized sum of best using the same strats I was using is around 1 hour and 6 minutes. Well, in light of just how low the time for this game has dropped since the revolution started, the obvious question at this point becomes, can you beat the game in under 1 hour? Well, let's explore some individual level strats that have not yet been implemented into the world record runs. In Tianshan, there are 2 potential route changes to be implemented. First is a launch found by me in the beginning of the level, to launch straight into the room holding the raft, skipping having to go around and enter the enemy compound, saving around 1 minute. This is very difficult, but with a good setup it might be doable for full game runs. So with this we could take the theoretical sum of best to around 1 hour and 5 minutes. The next strat in Tianshan we call raftless, and is precisely what it sounds like, skipping the raft completely. The route to do this first involves an extremely difficult and blind launch from the beginning of the level straight to the piston room. After that you can do the usual crawl glitch flight to reach the next candle. After that you R-warp back to the beginning and launch to the 3rd candle. After that you rinse and repeat for the 4th candle, R-warp to the beginning and launch to the 4th candle, and then after collecting all the candles you R-warp one more time back to the start. You can then launch to the end pedestal and finish the level, like we do in the current world record. This route therefore skips having to pick up the raft from the enemy compound here, since, well, we only launch, fly and R-warp around the level instead of having to use the raft to sail. This route is extremely precise to say the least, with no less than 4 long rocket launches, and unless a somewhat consistent method is found, this will probably never make its way into a full game run. This route saves another minute over the previously mentioned route, but until a better version of this is found, I don't think we can realistically add this to full game runs yet. So I will not be adding this time save to our hypothetical sum of best. In Shambhala, we mentioned that it's possible to launch right into the final corridor of the level, instead of launching into the final boss area. By landing in the final corridor, you skip having to perform the second launch to skip the boss fight. But this one is also extremely precise, because the landing area is very small, so the run would have to become very optimized for people to actually go for this in runs. This would save around 30 to 40 seconds. Again though, I don't think it's fair to add this to our list of realistic potential time save for full game runs. It's just too difficult. In Palawan Lagoon, it's possible to launch right from the start to the button to open the final door. The route then looks like this, and it skips having to collect the machete, which is located here. This method is not something I have personally tried out, but according to the Kovich, it is somewhat reasonable to add this into a full game run, so this is something we might see in the future. This saves 30 to 40 seconds. So with this, our theoretical sum of best goes down to, let's say, around 1 hour, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. In Volcano, I found an earlier spot to launch. In the method used in the current world record, we have to play over 2 minutes of the level before being able to launch, but with this new spot we can launch more than a minute earlier. Compared to other launches in the game, this one is not much more difficult, so this one might very well find its way into the full game run at some point. The route then looks like this, and this saves around 1.5 minutes. So we can take our theoretical sum of best down to 1 hour and 3 minutes. In Meroe, there is also a strat to launch from the beginning of the level into the corridor with the end trigger instead of flying to the end. This is done by hovering into this pyramid, which unloads everything, so we can launch into the final trigger. The route then looks sort of like this, and it saves around 20 to 30 seconds, if performed optimally, but is extremely difficult, so I'm not so sure we will see this one implemented anytime soon. Additionally, there is also a method to use the hang unload to fly through the walls quicker instead of having to fly all the way out of the map to unload everything. This is done by getting crawl glitch and then flying up to this ledge to hang off the edge and then letting go. This makes it so we can fly through walls, so we can then fly straight to the end of the level, instead of having to fly all the way out of bounds to unload the walls. This only saves around 10 seconds and is fairly inconsistent, but it is a lot more doable than the launch method mentioned earlier, so we might see this implemented if the game gets somewhat optimized. Lastly, if you paid attention, there is one level that has valiantly stood up against our glitch hunting efforts, and that is the level The Infernal Machine. For a long time, the only glitch used in this level was a clip through the floor, saving around 15 to 20 seconds, found by Bluescreen. But in July 2022, Bluescreen found a way to skip a 2-minute cutscene. Normally you press a button to open this door and a long cutscene plays. Bluescreen found out that by having the lighter in hand, so the lighter is triggered by using the B button, and then pressing the door button by holding B, the game would register Indy as having pressed the button, but not trigger the cutscene until the player releases B and lets go of the lighter. We could then simply save the game while holding the lighter and reload. The game would then load Indy to the place after the cutscene has played. This skip is super easy and is essentially free. For anyone who wants to run the game, there is a 2-minute free time save, so in some sense world record is kind of up for grabs. With this we can take our theoretical sum of best down to 1 hour and 1 minute. And that's pretty much the end of the discoveries we have made so far. So, unfortunately, a sub 1 hour run is not really realistic at this point. We know it is theoretically possible to beat the game in under an hour. If we combine all individual level records plus all menuing and end cutscenes, we get a time of around 55 or 56 minutes. But like I mentioned before, a lot of these strats are not realistic at all for full game runs. I have no doubts though that a bigger community and more runners can find better setups and tech, so I believe the 1 hour barrier will fall one day. I also want to mention that there are a ton of glitched states for indie that we have yet to find any particular use for, but might become useful in the future. All of these glitched states have some wonky unintended mechanics which might lead to something bigger in the future. Although I am very proud of the work we have put into optimizing this game, I also realized that this game has not been explored completely yet, and that the small group of people we currently have in the community are probably not enough to fully crack open the potential for a speed game with glitches of this magnitude. Now, what do I actually think of this game as a speed game? Well, to be honest, it's not an easy question. I really like indie's movement, and I find running, jumping, and platforming generally a pleasant experience. The crawl glitch flying is also an extremely fun and unique glitch that really feels great to execute. Stringing together multiple crawl glitch flights to get to a certain location feels great. Some of those flights are very easy, while others require very precise inputs if you don't want to softlock. So the crawl glitch flying is great in my opinion. And on that note, if you are interested in trying these glitches out, I would really recommend booting up an emulator to test this stuff. It's super fun to play around with the crawl glitch flying, but just make sure to start out on emulator because it's pretty easy to softlock the game when testing stuff. Now, the launches, however, are a different story completely. Some of these launches require such precise angles, timings, and indie goes so fast that they become frustratingly difficult. And not difficult in a satisfying way, but more in a way where you feel everything is essentially just up to chance. Remember, I used a metronome to make them easier to some extent, but frankly, it's not great that you have to rely on a metronome to make the speedrun enjoyable, and optimally you would want to do this kind of stuff without outside equipment. But who knows, maybe I'm simply not talented enough to master these launches in a way that they become enjoyable. I'm sure some talented gamers out there could get them relatively consistent. As a concept, I love the idea of these launches. Being able to fling indie across whole levels in seconds sounds insanely powerful and flashy and awesome and all that, but it's just so hard. I would love to see more people try to tackle these launches, to see first of all just how difficult people find them in general, and also to see if other people might find ways to make them more consistent. But okay, I really don't want to deter people from trying this game as a speed game. You can always choose a route that is not as launch heavy and relies more on crawl glitch flying. You can easily get a sub 100 minute run by using mostly crawl glitch flying, and that might be a more enjoyable experience. You could then gradually introduce more launches if you want to optimize your run further. People can also of course run the no major glitches category, which is around 4 hours long. There is also a 100% category called All Treasures, where you have to pick up 10 treasures in each level, in addition to playing the bonus level, Peru. I have already spent a considerable amount of time routing that run, and it's likely to clock in at around 4 hours as well, but could probably be taken down to around 3.5 hours with more optimization. Because of its length, that run relies more on consistent crawl glitch flying methods rather than launching, which might make it a very fun speedrun. Although it was my intention, I never got around to running the All Treasures full game category, but who knows, I still might do at some point. The route is pretty much complete, so I just have to learn it. Anyway, this video is probably already way too long, so I'm going to call it here. As always, I will have links in the description for the speedrunning Discord and the current world record. Special thanks to Bluescreen, The Kovich, and Nathan is Bored. both for helping making this video, but also just for all the good times during these eventful months of 2021. This infernal machine speedrunning revolution was truly one of the best speedrunning times I've ever had. And I'm super happy and grateful to have gotten the chance to enjoy it with you guys. The next video in this series will be about a very obscure game called Starshot Space Circus Fever. And of course, if you made it this far, thank you so much, dear viewer, for watching.